Welcome to video 9, and in this video we're going to be looking at tables. What you can see on the left hand side is the HTML that I'm working with, and on the right hand side the code that is the image that's being produced from that. This is the table element all the way there, and you can see it's very simply defined by the word table and end table. It's then got these parts here, TR. There's 4 of them, and you can see that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. So TR is clearly short for table row. I've then got 1, 2, 3 columns, and if you look at the elements within the table row element, I've got 1, 2, 3 of these, and there's 2 different types, TD and TH. TD is the most common. You can see that I've repeated that down here, and all TD stands for is table data. So that gives me a row here. My first row I've made up with TH, which is table heading. I don't have to start with TH, there's no reason for it. I could very simply have just put TD. All it does is affect the formatting. So don't think you have to have TH, but particularly when you get into CSS, it really does help to format the top and make it look very pretty. I would recommend that you now pause the video and type that all in, get the same results so that you're getting the same thing. I could sit here for 5 minutes waiting for you, but that would be a serious waste of video time. Right, now let's have a look at the next part. So we've got a table there. What else can we do with a table? Well, the next part you can do is CSS, but again you'll see this all over the web. People do this all the time, and so I'm just going to show you some of the features. Equally, this does allow us to do other certain characteristics. Again, possible in CSS, but just to get our heads around this. Border equals 1. Simply puts a border. It puts a border around each cell, but only on level 1. If I increased the level, it's only going to then affect the outer edge, and you can see that it's got some formatting, and you can change the formatting and everything else. If you wished to change each of the cells, then I'm sorry, but you have to use a command on each of these lines. It's long-winded, it's tiring, try not to get too clever with it. It will take some time to do. The other thing we can use is cell spacing. Now notice something. I've just typed in an attribute and one thing has not happened. It hasn't turned red. Now if I run that command, nothing happens. That's because this isn't an attribute. I happen to have put that in, and I shouldn't have done. This is why things like Notepad++ and all the other tools are really useful, because they do give you a hint that things are going wrong. Now, as you can see here, cell spacing 1, you can't really see what's happened, so I'm going to increase that, and you can now see that what it does is cell spacing puts spacing around each of the cells, extending them out. An alternative to that is cell padding. And that puts the spacing inside the cells themselves. So padding inside, spacing outside. Okay, other things to be looking at. Well, one of the things to be aware of is that sometimes you forget how many rows you've got, so you don't put one in. That will produce this strange result here, this lost cell. Remember, these are called cells. That's just like any spreadsheet package. So we're talking about cells, rows and columns. So this cell looks lost. So you might say, well, that's easy enough, I'll simply put it back, but I may not want any data in there. Well, unfortunately, you'll get the same result. So what you have to do is introduce, and this is where I want you to start introducing some of the special characters. You know they're special characters because they start with the ampersand, the and sign, that's Shift 7 on most standard keyboards. The ampersand and then the commands. Non-breaking space in this case. There are lots of these special characters. If you find strange characters appearing on your screen, it's because you need to use a special character rather than use the one that's straight on your keyboard. But this one is nothing more than adds a space, so it makes it look normal. Now, though it doesn't affect tables, Do you remember when we were looking at paragraphs, if you put lots of spaces, if you entered space several times, it would come out as one space. This is another way of generating more than one, because if all I did was use that command once, then the second time, then the third time, then the fourth time, then the fifth time, in the paragraph it will introduce spaces and they will appear. So it's quite a useful thing to use. There's a lot of these special characters, you'll get to know them as you go further in. Sometimes you don't want the data there, but it does make your table look messy. So what you may want to do is make this span across. Now we're talking about we've only got 2 columns, we need 3. So I need to do col span equals and tell it how many columns. So col span are obviously short for column span, or spanning across several columns. And the number in there tells it how many columns. Now clearly you wouldn't put 1 because that's a single column, and there's no point, that's what TD does. But if I do col span equals 2, or any number 2 or above, then that means that that cell extends in. Now if I didn't want to do it that way, if I might want to decide that actually what I'm going to do instead is I don't want this at all, and I don't want this one. Now clearly my table is now looking really messed up. So let's do the first thing. The col span equals to there. That's going to move Rover, so he's not only the name, he's also his own food. But equally we can introduce it to go downwards. So row span must be the alternative, and again same principle, the number has got to represent how many you want to go down. So Rover is now a dog, a fish and food all at the same time. That's pretty impressive. So we have there all the different ways that we can create and use tables. There are other things you can do with tables, but do be aware, some people will try to get you to use them for formatting your pages. When we come to look at formatting, particularly in terms of CSS, it will start to make a lot of sense that this is not an effective way of doing it. Anyway, I hope that's been useful. Or one thing I did want to use, one further feature that I wanted to introduce you to was captions. And captions are nothing more than add a top to your whole system. So again, worth noting, captions can be used at the top, then you've got a nice format. That's all I wanted to cover. Hope that's been useful. See you later.